that supplies 49% of all of our power. Yeah, he's going to bring in big government. I mean, he's talking like he's the Messiah. He's running TV ads where he's already sitting in the White House. And so what he's going to bring is a lot of grassroots support just because the public thinks they're getting political change because he looks different. But instead, they're going to get change, the whole George Bush agenda on steroids. And so that's the bottom line here. That's why you have Barack Obama unpopular on almost every issue. The only reason he is popular with the people is because he's from a different party, and they're hoping for some type of real change, and they're not going to get it. What they're going to get is what his running mate called for twice last week, a new world order where the very private banks that have orchestrated the derivatives collapse for a vertical integration, a consolidation, they are now openly calling for a world government run by a select group of banks out of London, England, that will set and control world taxes, world regulations, stock markets. We will buy our carbon credits directly from a private group of central banks. And so that is the change that Barack Obama is talking about. He is talking about bringing in more control, more of the same. That's why he's getting more corporate contributions and more defense contributions and more big money contributions than John McCain. The establishment positioned John McCain to win the Republican primary because they knew they were basically running a political corpse, just like the system ran Bob Dole in 1996 against Bill Clinton. And so we're all talking about, the first black president. While we're all talking about these little side issues, we should, as un-American people, talk about the fact that Barack Obama has lied about every major issue. He has turned around and stabbed the American people in the back. He got the nomination claiming he was going to end the spying, in the police state, in the war, and now Biden and others has come out and said, guess what? We're not going to end any of it, basically. It's going to be very unpopular, but this is what we're going to do. We are going to see more of the New World Order neocon agenda, and we document it all at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. And so you're going to see massive resistance form in the next few years after the honeymoon is over, and as the United States goes into this orchestrated depression, you're going to see Barack Obama become incredibly unpopular, and we're going to see all sorts of resistance at every level here in the United States, and that's what I'm concerned about, because the left was all against George Bush and his globalist agenda, but now because Barack Obama is set to be launched in there with this whole messianic vision, talking about he is the one, he is coming to save the earth, Newsweek calling him the president of the world, the whole world saying he's this wonderful, sweet, loving person. If you look at what he really is doing, he's bringing tyranny and an end to the free market, a crony capitalist system where a select group of interbanks and corporations loot the United States, like we saw with Boris Yeltsin and the oligarchs in Russia. The United States is being looted from pillar to post by the transnational criminals. Joseph Stiglitz on CNBC yesterday called for a world government run by the banks. They are coming out against the people.
All right, let's see if James in London agrees.
Well, look, can I just add, as a political scientist, it's a real honour to be on the show with Wayne Slater tonight. But let me see if I can add some sort of political dimension to that from an international perspective. You're going to hear an awful lot over the next 24 hours and moving in through the interregnum until the inauguration about change. Change is what we've heard from Barack Obama, of course, over the last 22 months or so. But history would dictate that in every presidential election, whilst people talk heavily about change, what you get a great deal of is actually continuity. Any president coming into office is going to be forced to continue a whole raft of issues. And what often changes is the rhetoric. Now, the rhetoric, as I'm sure many people realize, is important. The rhetoric of George Bush really put people's backs up here in Europe, in London, and his whole tone was very aggressive, and his demeanor was seen to be very much at odds with a European perspective. I think Obama, the change he will initiate will be one of tone and of an approach, a much more inclusive, multilateral, almost Clinton-esque, I think, approach to foreign policy, which will be much more in keeping with a European perspective. And as a result, I think, very much ease America's position in the rest of the world vis-a-vis the countries with which it is attempting to form alliances, both militarily and financial. Whoever becomes president has got a series of uphill challenges to face with. One could almost ask who would want to be president at this point. You've got the war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, and a financial crisis, which is clearly going to dominate their time in office. So whatever the candidates promise or pledge on the campaign trail, they're really going to face an uphill struggle in just trying to manage on a day-to-day basis. And all these promises about spending and youth movement, I think, will take a secondary place once Obama, if he is installed in the White House, comes to pass.
All right, Wayne Slater, of course, you've been in the plains of both campaigns, but you have had the chance of being on the plains of the two only major campaigns. Now, we will be talking about the third parties as well, but this change, both are talking about the change. Any difference between the two? If, let's have a preview of the difference. We'll get into the details the second half of the show. Wayne?
We have Wayne.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought you were going to break there. No, look, there's going to be a change. Now, it may not be the kind of change that Alex would anticipate, but there's going to be a change. There's a difference between Barack Obama, Democratic Party, this approach, and John McCain. And part of that change, as Alex said correctly, was this nation is sick and tired of George W. Bush, 8 years of the Bush administration, and by extension, the attitude that the rest of the world has about America. Americans don't like it that much of Europe, much of the rest of the world doesn't particularly have use for us. That the preemption policies with respect to the war of the George Bush administration, the economic policies at home, which both Democrats and Republicans have shared to cause big problems, that all of that together has created an environment for significant change. You're going to see in a Barack, we'll talk, as you say, more specifically later, but we're going to see an approach in terms of an outreach to Europe and the rest of the world that is more robust than we have seen certainly under the Bush administration. But we're going to see an effort to deal with the economic crisis in a way that is somewhat more sensitive to middle-income Americans, not simply the wealthy. At the same time, there's going to have to be a recognition that capital in the United States, which was part of the problem in terms of a few greedy operators, is going to have to be tended to. So there's going to be an element of continuity in the way the Barack Obama administration, if there is one, runs the White House. But it's going to be different. Its approach internationally, its approach here in the United States. I should say that one area where it will be exactly the same, I think, is if, in fact, Barack Obama is challenged. And Iran is a perfect example of what some Republican conservatives and John McCain and Barack Obama's own running mate suggest could be an early challenge, a testing of this young president. In the event something like that happens, I don't think people ought to be fooled. This president would act pretty much like John McCain would act, George Bush would act, a traditional United States president would act, and that would be very strongly to protect United States interests.
Of course, we have only just a few seconds left to the end of the first half, but something people haven't heard, over 20 parties, third parties, so-called third parties, running, but even Americans haven't heard the names of most of these, and they do not know the candidates. When we come back, we'll discuss the third parties, why it's only blue and or red, and then the change on the lips of both Barack Obama and his rival, John McCain. We'll be back after a short break. Friends, just hours before the first Tuesday, after the first Monday in November, constitutionally when the Americans are supposed to go to the polls and choose the 44th president of the United States of America. We're taking a look at all the controversies surrounding the election, how the world views the election. From London, we're joined by Dr. James Boyce, Assistant Professor of International Political Studies at Richmond, the American International University in London, and founder of the Resolute Group. From Austin, Texas, we're joined by Wayne Slater, author and senior political writer at Dallas Morning News, co-author of Bush's Brain, How Karl Rove Made George W. Bush Presidential. By the phone, from Austin, Texas, by Alex Jones, investigative journalist, documentary filmmaker, owner of Infowars.com. Gentlemen, once again, our pleasure. But let's take a look at the websites of a few other parties called third parties in the U.S. Constitution Party, the Socialist Party USA, the Peace and Freedom against the Libertarian Party, the Green Party. And, of course, the Green Party says the real difference is talking about the real difference between the Democrat and Republican parties. Do they represent your interests and values? The Democrats talk about the different policies, positions, and priorities would see from a Democrat in the White House versus a Republican. Most Democrat and Republican politicians, including Clinton, Gore, Kerry, and Bush, hold similar positions on major issues, and that's why we need a real choice to polls, a party that gives power to we the people instead of powerful corporations. Then the site brings up a list of different issues and say where they happen to be the same. It says issue, Green Party, Republicans, Democrats. And it talks about major issues like invasion and occupation of Iraq, where it says Green Party opposes, but Republicans and Democrats both support. And when you go to the details, it says even invasion of Iraq, most Democrats, if not Barack Obama, they supported that. They actually signed the authorization and also still support that. The Patriot Act, invasion of Afghanistan, these are what Republicans, Democrats are all the same. Kosovo war, military budget.